let's get into Bitcoin for the day. This news piece coming out in the early morning hours that Biden administration is preparing an executive action to regulate digital assets such as Bitcoin as a matter of national security, Barron's reports. Now, Barron's is a financial newspaper. They're actually rather trusted. One publication that I actually happen to give a fuck about myself. But more importantly with this is rather interesting here because right now the market is, showing like we're going to have a little bit of a short-term rally, which is fine. Anyways, when this executive order does drop, the expectation going into it versus what actually is decided, what actually comes about of this is going to be the driver for that event. So basically, we don't really have much to go off of, actually. It just sounds like they're going to be regulating digital assets. We already expect that. So I look at this long-term as actually a good thing. The reason why I look at it long-term as a good thing is because it provides clarity for a very unclear subject right now with regards to how, accounting, how taxes, how all of the, moving parts within the crypto sphere are operating right now. And that will actually allow, likely at some point in time, a spot ETF to actually be accepted. For right now, I don't think that any of the ones being reported on in like the next few months here have any chance of getting accepted. Perhaps later this year, I do think is will have a chance. But for right now, and from what I understand from the people who I really look to trust in their analysis of these sort of more ephemeral events, is the purpose of this year and the purpose of last year in a lot of ways was to wash out and clear the way, pave the way for a more regulated crypto space. And what does that essentially look like? That essentially looks like taking out and essentially, getting rid of these 100x Wild Wild West exchanges. I do believe that the crypto exchanges, that are offering up these insane amounts of leverage with, basically no KYC, are probably, their days are probably numbered. And that likely leads up towards a more legitimized space as the infrastructure gets built around the sort of rails, in the crypto sphere. So at some point, yes, I do think that a spot ETF will be accepted. This, to me, looks like it is legitimizing things. Obviously, if it was, not going to be that, if it was just going to be a straight up ban or something like that, which it sounds very unlikely that it is not, then that would, that essentially is, you don't regulate something that you would ban, right? That you're not going to use. So I do think that is a more long-term encouraging thing. Short-term, does it provide a little bit of downside volatility? Perhaps yes, but we'll go into the chart soon enough to kind of document that. Of course, that's my good old place right there to show Bybit. Hey, go get wrecked on fucking Bybit. It's not going to be around for too much longer. Sorry, I'm doing a terrible job of representing them, but sorry Bybit if you're listening, but yeah, look, if you're not an experienced trader, if you don't have winning strategies, or if you haven't been winning with your strategies, it's very unwise to be going off to any leverage exchange, whether it be Bybit, FIMEX, FTX, whatever the fuck, and basically gambling there essentially. So, realistically, unless you already have a good amount of successful history, trading, then it's really unwise to be doing that sort of a thing. I would not suggest it. 80% of traders never have a long-term win, net win. And so, understand that unless if you actually gone through the whole rigmarole of back testing your strategies and getting the forward testing as well alongside a small dollar live account, with results that you are, happy with, then it's probably not just happened by magic by going onto a fucking leverage exchange and punting 100x, because that is very unwise in my experience. Anyways, let's get started off right here with Bitcoin. Let's actually go over the short and medium term time frame ranges first, because again, when we do have an event like this, I do like to play on the peripheries just for the easy trade essentially. So I'm going to get rid of the very short term time frame stuff right there, because that is not relevant. Actually, I want to focus on the 4 hour. 4 hour range is actually very much unchanged from yesterday to today, and actually the few days prior. A high of about $39,000 on a 4 hour closing basis versus a low of about $34,500 essentially on a 4 hour closing basis as well. As long as Bitcoin's kind of oscillated within here, nothing's really actually changed. Bitcoin's still maintaining a bit of a downtrend on medium and higher term timeframes, but you do see that the very short term timeframes are suggesting a potential reversal right here, but that will not be confirmed at all whatsoever, not even close. This is all hoping that I'm talking about right now to the upside until Bitcoin gets back above what would have been that last rejective lower high right here at about $39,000. Technically a little bit lower than that on a 4 hour closing basis, but close enough is close enough. More importantly, if that were to happen, you would have your first higher low right here. Obviously that would be your higher high. You got a nice reversal after that, and Bitcoin very likely does play back up towards the next major region, of which we can pull up our fibs over here, which would be somewhere around the 382 Fibonacci retracement at about $40,000 territory for the next sort of daily area to be aware of. However, longer term, perhaps coming into February in this case, I would be looking for moves upon validation above that region to the 0.5, somewhere between actually the 0.5 and the 618, which could be as far as 48,000 and as low as about $44,000. Again, all hinges upon the validation of that area right there beforehand. And of course, if we go into the short-term timeframes like this on the hourly, it would be wise to mark off the actual low from yesterday. In fact, about 35,500 or so. If Bitcoin does start to break below there on an hourly, I would be looking for one more run around the lows, that being between about 34 to 34,500. But I do not actually get bearish on Bitcoin for continuation first before a bounce. We can talk about the more long-term of that later, because yes, there is still long-term bearishness here. We are still looking at a long-term downtrend, obviously, but for right now, it is looking like Bitcoin probably does bounce out of this range first before playing out any further downside, if it's going to play out any further downside at all. What I want to reference now is I want to go back on over here into the Crown Trading application, and I want to reference the global open interest. This is still in more of a pairs area right here. We have seen a nice reset on this. Anytime that it has gotten above about 13 billion, we have seen about a 20 to 25% correction minimum, and at maximum, well, thus far, a 50% correction or so. And what's relevant about this is that on the last rally up to $52,000 in early December, actually later December in this case, we did see it once again get actually just above 13 billion, closer to 14 billion in this case. So we are seeing it once again crater down. And realistically, I want to see this reset somewhere between our summer lows and our September lows right here. That being between about 8.5 billion or 5.25 billion. I actually have a nice alert for this if I go into my alerts over here, which you can do as well for free. Hey, god damn it, I don't want that right now. There we go. And you can see that I have it. I have an alert set for when it goes under 9 billion and also when it goes under 8 billion. Just want to have a bit of an earlier sort of alert on that factor. This is more for the long term, so I really wouldn't be entertaining the possibility of a macro low being in until we see that really crater down a little bit more. That can come multiple ways, however. That can come, one, from longs getting wrecked, which longs have been getting wrecked for the last 2.5 months straight. I think that they've been wrecked enough. What's more likely to happen right here is actually shorts closing and springing upon that next rally. And then the question is, does Bitcoin put in a major lower high on the weekly in that bull trappy area? If we go back to our charts over here, which would be on the weekly and daily schedule between about the 0.5 and the 618. That is my traditional, or not my traditional, that is the traditional bull trappy-ish region off of a early reversal in this case for the weekly. So what am I talking about right now? Basically, Bitcoin got its first lower low on the weekly compared to its September $40,000 low right here since like the last few years. I mean, it's basically been a straight up trend. I mean, we did actually have a very, very slight lower low right here, but of course we did not have the lower high to follow that. Anyways, after you get the lower low, obviously you're likely to have a bit of a rally regardless of whether you're bullish or bearish. And then the question is, does that rally create a lower high, in this case on the weekly, or does it bust on through? In this case, that would be like all clear above about $49,000 or $50,000, let's say. So this next move that we're probably looking for in February in this case, assuming that Bitcoin does bust on through the short-term, medium-term time, actually more like medium-term time frame range highs in this case, maybe does something like this and then pops up. The question is, once it gets into this region right here, whether it be 44 or maybe even as much as $48,000, what happens after that? Very likely going to see some weakness. And then the question is, does the weekly set in a higher low somewhere just above $40,000? If so, beautiful, amazing. There's your fucking all Bula Muna again, and we could start to talk about, $60,000 plus and all that good stuff. The doomium, however, and what is technically more likely right now actually as well, is that Bitcoin rejects right there or somewhere around that region and then plops back down, specifically the $40,000 level, that 382 fib right there. And then at that point, really have to be looking for, at minimum, another run somewhere between about the 29 to 31, or sorry, more like 29 to $32,000 blue box right here. And if that area does break over time, which I do not think it would break on the next test down, to be quite honest with you, if it is going to break, I think it's going to be, a very long time doing something like this, actually, where blah, 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 blah. And then maybe like later this year or early next year, it does break down somewhere around about $25,000. But that would be sort of my criteria for that. Anyways, I do want to go over the reasons why I do think that Bitcoin, if again, independent of the event, which the event is going to supersede everything that I say here. So please understand that technical analysis does take not even a back seat, but it's not even on the fucking bus. It's not even on the fucking bus right now. And I very carefully mention bust because we've had some issues with that term in the past. Anyways, sorry. Look, just trying to make an analogy here. That's all. Anyways, technical analysis takes, it's not even in the fucking lexicon when you are having a big event driven sort of move. Anyways, in this case, I do want to support some reasons why I think that this is somewhat relevant, or at least why the short term is a little bit more respectful of the high, and give a few sort of counterpoints to this as well in some validation and invalidation regions actually. And first and foremost, or I wouldn't say it's foremost, but first, we do have the daily stochastic momentum right here. That is heading up from some pretty critical regions, to be fair. Now, volatility is already kind of high, so this is not like a perfect signal or anything like that. It does align with, however, the narrative of a bounce, but this would be a corrective bounce actually is what that would suggest. If we go over here to the 2-day, this one is also going to be freshly crossing to the upside with any sort of a closure today above 36,450. Bitcoin currently trading almost $1,000 above that right now, and you can see that that is, yes, closing today. Sorry, I forgot to mention the daily area, which is just below 35,000 bucks. The 5-day, and what I really put a lot of weight on right here is actually going to flip up for the first time since the October rally actually to to our all-time highs, in this case at $69,000, great number right there, will officially cross the upside for the first time basically in like the last 4 or 5 months with any sort of a closure above $35,000. Now, this is not closing today, so this is not relevant for today. It will close, I believe, on Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern time alongside the weekly as well. If that does happen, I just want to pull the last few times that we have seen it cross to the upside from around this region in the past. I have a nice little green horizontal bar right here. The last time that we saw it actually hit this region was December 2018, and that, of course, was your macro cycle lows of 3,100 from years ago. Now, things did take a long time after that, a very long time after that to get going. In fact, even retesting it right around here again. But ultimately, that was the major macro low in that cycle. And of course, the time before that we actually saw it come all the way down around there was October 2014 and December 2014 as well. Now, these ones are a little bit more obscure in the sense that the first one in October 2014 did produce a nice rally. And this was within the context of a pretty nasty downtrend. And that was a corrective move. And it was a corrective move that from wick to wick in this case went up 72%. Now, it was, of course, still holding the downtrend. That would be sort of the more bearish take on this, kind of what we're looking at right here. And then over the next few months, you see a rally up somewhere into the mid, maybe even upper $40,000 territory, and then slam it back down to slightly new lows in this case. The other stab that we have down around here was the actual macro cycle low of that cycle in 2014, 2015. Other than that, we have one other iteration, which is way back on over here in October 2011, and that was your cycle lows, of course, at the very genesis of Bitcoin, essentially. So I do think that holds a bit of weight, especially alongside the other indications that we are seeing. For at least a bounce first, the question is, does a bounce maintain above those critical numbers or not? Until that happens, everything that I talked about to long-term upside is hopium. It is not the most relevant or relatable thing to be happening. And it should be known that higher term timeframes like the monthly, which are going to be closing in the next few days here, are, well, not fucking bullish. How about that? So here's the thing. I want to bring you up to where we're at right now. Now, Bitcoin is bounced off the 20 simple. That's the white moving average right here, which is, which is a nice bouncy area. And we have seen that and we have seen that play as a nice support on the macro plenty of times in the past. But here's where it gets a little bit more, well, I guess nasty, I suppose, if you want to be a long-term boolah, at least for right now. We do have a monthly MACD crossing to the downside for the first time basically since January of 2020, which was 2 months before, or sorry, it was actually February 2020, which was 1 month before the old flu dump. And the time before that we saw it actually cross down was back on over here in June 2018. That was obviously coming off of the 20 simple again. By the way, both of these iterations actually coming off the 20 simple. Let me just highlight this one for you as well. Basically right here, again, bounce off the 20 simple, boom, 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 1, 2, 3, 4 months, and then go fuck yourself all the way to the downside. And then same thing back on over here as well into August 2014, bounced off the 20 simple, a couple months to kind of oscillating around there, and then go fuck yourself to the downside for a big bad move. By the way, all of these corrections, if you want to call them that, maybe a better word is crash, did come down to the green 55 exponential moving average on the monthly, which is currently trading just above $22,000 or in the mid, like let's say 22,400 or so. It's going to be rising with each and every passing month. And I do look at that as likely the worst case scenario, assuming that Bitcoin, initiates a long-term downside, if that even happens to begin with. On top of that, we can take that one step further with the PMAR right here. We have seen several times that it has crossed the moving average on this, the red versus the white, essentially, both to the upside and the downside. Those have essentially indicated, well, macro shifts in directions as well, alongside that MACD cross, both to the upside and the downside here too. So these have really, really good history with each other. Not too many iterations, to be fair, but I do think that that is worth knowing right now, because as long as Bitcoin is again below, let's just call it $49,000, bounces up to that region, which would be about more than a $10,000 move, would still be considered corrective on the macro right here. So please do understand that. Please do understand, the conditions for validations right now for the time being on the short-term timeframes. If we just ignore that event again, which is going to supersede what I say right here, Bitcoin is looking like it wants to give another try back up towards $39,000. And if we look at our momentum oscillators on the higher term timeframes, I do think that that aligns with that narrative as well. And if we do go over here into the short term time frame momentum oscillators from a stochastic perspective, we can see that full hour stochastic are heading up as long as we're above 36,500, which we are currently about $1,000 above right now. 6 hour is... 6 I actually really, really like, is going to head up above 37,340, which is closing when in, it's going to be another 5.5 hours basically. So not anytime soon. 3 hours, obviously going to be already up as well, I imagine. Yes, indeed. 36,500, and hourly is, I'm going to guess up as well. A little bit more critical right there, but $37,000 to maintain current momentum. So overall, I do think that Bitcoin has a chance here. I'd still be looking at this area just around, it's technically just above $39,000. If I'm using an hourly closure, I'd be about $39,350 for continuation to just above $40,000. If I'm using a full hour closure, I'd say just above about $39,000 would probably do, or sorry, just at about $39,000 would probably do it for me as well for calling a bit of a short-term range resolution. If I'm looking at, or sorry, medium-term range resolution, if I'm looking at the short term, I'd be using yesterday's spike low, 35,550 for continuation, not to new lows just yet, but just to move back down somewhere around 34 to 34,500. I am not bearish for any new lows as long as Bitcoin is above 34,500 on a medium or higher term time frame closure or closing basis in this case. I do think that what is more likely is that we see a bounce up and out of this range, as we did say coming into this week and the last few days, after a bit of a swipe of the lows yesterday, which we did get on Bitcoin, but more so on some of our other assets that we were looking at, like Ethereum, for example. And now probably, what's a little more likely is a bit of a bounce. And then the question is, where do things land? Probably around mid to end of February right here. Anyways, hopefully that was helpful with Bitcoin. Hopefully that was helpful with Bitcoin. Maybe we check out some indicators over here as well. I don't really see anything that's too interesting on the hourly. I mean, it is just showing some short-term upside. Full hour, same thing as well. Not anything too interesting right there. Daily Jewel Light is actually still showing some upside momentum. Here's the thing though, this is not like a reversal signal in my experience, because volatility is already rather high right here. So when you do look at it from that perspective, again, it does align more likely with the corrective bounce, which corrective within the current context of the trend is, well, more downside long term. But for right now, can that bring things up, back up to like 40,000, maybe even all the way up to 44,000? Yeah, definitely possible. And I should also talk about what would be required for a $44,000 move. I just want to see a daily closure above about 39. Probably 39 would do it for me. Or sorry, hold on, where's the 382? Sorry, the 382 is at $40,000. How do I keep on getting mixed up with that number? Jesus Christ, man. Anyways, yeah, I think that does it for Bitcoin right there. Just kind of cruising around the different timeframes as I haven't done my early morning perusal here just yet. Yeah, looking at the weekly right now as well, which by the way, CME will be closing today at 5 p.m. Standard Time. This is more of a bouncy area right here after the full-on collapse of this price action for the last 2.5 months without any real bounces in between. So hopefully that was helpful. And there you go for Bitcoin. Please recognize the areas for validations and invalidations, and what I would in the areas where I kind of think that there's a little more of an easier trade just based off of the higher term time frame edge. Hopefully that was helpful, and there you go, sirs and zers.